Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about metal treatment before you paint. Got a lot of information to cover, so let's get started. All right, the first thing I'm going to talk about is Etch Prime. Now this is SEM. I've got a couple brands here. I've got Rustoleum. We'll get into that in a little bit. But all my information about this I got from SEM. Now I'm not sponsored by SEM, but I do like their products. I'll call customer service every so often, talk to a guy there and get a lot of info. So I'd always wonder how this stuff treats the metal. And I've done projects before where you'll sandblast something, you grind off rust, and there's little pits in there, then you kind of figure there's still rust, microscopic, maybe you can't see it, maybe some of you can, and I figured a good heavy coat of this, the acid in it, would etch the metal and it would neutralize the rust. So I wanted to be sure, so I called SEM and I was told that that does not treat any rust that's on the metal. Even though this stuff has acid in it, the only thing this product is good for, it's just for covering up a little bare metal before you paint. I was doing my own project, if you've seen that video, restoring an early 1950s refrigerator, and there was a lot of rust bleeding through the paint over the years, and down at the bottom of the fridge there's a lot of heavy rust on there. And even though I sandblasted it, you still don't think you got everything out of there. I looked at the website and they sell this stuff in quarts and gallons, and I thought, well, I'll just buy a quart of it, put a nice coat over everything. So when I talked to my contact at SEM, he said that's not going to help at all. It's not going to treat any rust. So my question to him was, if this stuff isn't good for really treating metal like that, why do you sell it in quarts and gallons? And I was told that they actually don't know what people are doing with it. And I think people are just buying it, putting a coat over bare metal just to be safe. SEM told me to use their epoxy primer over all bare metal. And if there is any microscopic rust that you really can't see, this is supposed to seal it down so it's not going to come back to haunt you. Now in talking with SEM, they said the epoxy is better than the urethane. Now there's going to be some discussion on that. Some people like urethane, some people like epoxy. I'm just going by what SEM told me. Now I usually like to break stuff down in simple terms. So if you're going to put in a windshield and you've got a tube of urethane, can you put that on the bare metal flange? No, you have to put a primer down before you can put the urethane. But if you want to seam seal something on bare metal, use a DTM caulking, and this is an epoxy. That kind of makes sense to me, where the epoxy has a little bit better adhesion than the urethane, but like I said, that's open for discussion. Okay, with my newfound knowledge on Etch Prime, epoxy versus urethane primer, I called a friend of mine, Barry. He owns Barry's Collision and Color. I talked with him about all this stuff, and he does a lot of experimenting with different products. He does a fair amount of restoration work, and I run by him what I was told by SEM, and he disagreed with a few of those things. He said he's used the epoxy primer just over bare metal, and he said within a couple years he's had it come back on him. So with that, what he told me about was using this Rustoleum Etch Prime. He said he's had real good luck with it. He'd put a coat of this on, let it sit a day, you can run a DA over it, it's got some body, you won't really sand through it, and then put your primer on top of that, let them sit out in the weather, and he said a couple years later it still looks good, no rust bleeding through. So with that information, I decided I'm going to try this. So that's what I used on that refrigerator project, and I also use it on that 70 Chevelle. I used it on the roof and the deck lid. It stays wet long enough where it looks like it's going to get good adhesion. Okay, next on the list, in talking with SEM, I was told if you want something really good to seal down rust, is use their rust trap. This is the equivalent of POR 15, and what SEM did, they used POR 15 for their model. They liked how it worked, but they wanted to change a couple things. POR 15, they recommend you use their cleaner before you put on their product, before you're treating your rust. SEM eliminated the cleaner. They just wanted one step. And I've used POR 15 before, and I didn't use the cleaner. I'm guessing a lot of guys don't mess with it. And one thing you may notice, they put it in a quart can with the plastic cap on it. I've had POR 15 before that come in a quart like this, and you get some around the edge and you put that cap back on, you're going to have a hard time getting it off because it almost welds it together. So that's a little bit easier to access it. I've used it on that 1950s refrigerator. It does work better if you spray it. I didn't want to mess with spraying it. I just brushed it on a few areas, the lower areas I wanted to take care of. And the issue with spraying is the isocyanates. I was always under the impression you have to have two components mixed together to get isocyanates. The second component is moisture, and that's the moisture in the air. If you live in a dry climate, this stuff is going to dry slower. Being that moisture is the second component, you got to protect your lungs lungs, and they said also protect your eyes. If the mist gets into your eyes, the moisture that's in your eyes will activate it. So take care of your lungs and take care of your eyes. Now another thing, this stuff dries rock hard. It's like sanding ceramic tile. I had to do a lot of sanding to get the brush marks out of it. This is not UV tolerant. It has to be top coated with something, primer, your paint, whatever you're going to put on there. And the thing is, it dries so hard, you can't use a scuff pad to it. You have to use sandpaper, scratch it up pretty good. I use it on that refrigerator project, and I'll see down the road how it holds up. I'm confident it's going to seal everything up just fine. Okay, next I'm going to talk about Rust-Oleum. This is Rust-Oleum Clean Metal Primer. Let me show you the issue I have with this stuff. This is one of the wheels on our fifth wheel RV, and about 5 years ago I needed new tires on this, so I had the tires dismounted. I took the rims, I sandblasted them. I spent a lot of time sandblasting these. They were perfectly clean, no rust, and I painted these with the Clean Metal Primer. And within a year, this rust started coming back, and it's all bleeding through. I top coated their Clean Metal Primer with Krylon paint. I've always had good luck with Krylon. It's a nice top coat, but a while back, I'm pretty sure Rust-Oleum bought them, and it's not as good as it used to be. So I'm really disappointed with Rust-Oleum, although I have been using their Etch Prime. Back in the 80s, I worked a part-time job, nights and weekends, working for a construction and excavating company, and I painted lots of equipment, did color changes on fleet vehicles, painted dump trucks, stuff like that. And on their dump trucks, they were wanting to use Centauri at the time, and it was okay. But some of these trucks, some of their service trucks, they led a pretty rough life. They got beat up pretty good. So I decided I'm going to paint them with Rust-Oleum because you could either touch them up pretty good. It was just like a white cab and a black box. The Rust-Oleum is cheap. Usually you didn't have to prime anything. You just put it right over everything. And the paint jobs come out beautiful. They looked real good. But 2 years later, they were flat, they were dull. It looked almost like you put flattening agent in the paint. And I've painted a lot of my own stuff over the years with Rust-Oleum, and I got tired of it just in a couple years. It looked terrible. So I called Rust-Oleum, talked to tech support one day. I was told their paint is only designed to last for 2 years. I think that's totally unacceptable. If it's indoors, if it's kept out of the sun, it'll hold up for years and years. Here's my 1948 Chevy dump truck that I owned for about 25 years. And in all those years, I think I painted this thing 3 times, and I used red Rust-Oleum. And you can see here, it looks like red oxide primer. And this paint job's probably been on there about 8 years, maybe at the time this picture is taken. Now here's the same truck after I painted it the very last time before I sold it, and it does look good. Rust-Oleum lays out pretty nice, gives a nice finish, so it just doesn't hold up out in the weather. It loses its color, loses its shine. Okay, that's about all the information I got on this, and like I said, everybody's going to have their own opinion, epoxy versus urethane. Use what you're comfortable with, do your own research, but there are a lot of options between Etch Prime, just a straight epoxy or urethane, the Rust Trap or Pour 15. If you like this video, smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you haven't already done it. Thanks for watching.